Hi, today I'll be talking about chapter two. Chapter two, oh my gosh, of inquiry and innovation in the classroom. So, this chapter kind of gives an overview um, about the 20% time in which you dedicate 20% of your workday or school day to pursuing a project that is of interest to you. So the first thing that they talk about is about Maria Montessori and how she was able to educate kids who maybe the example that they give is she educated children who had special needs, and she was able to teach them how to read and write, and how her method was kind of spread around in the United States in the early 19 teens, then got lost after World War I, and then kind of reemerged. So I've heard of Montessori schools before. I have, excuse me. I have that written. See, I'm already resisting because it's different. It's like a different method. So, I mean, the Montessori school, like, when I think of Montessori school, I think of like preschoolers and kindergartners kind of like wandering aimlessly from like project to project. And in my brain, I'm like, isn't that what kids are supposed to do, like, when they're little? Like, isn't that the parents' job to give them like activities and to take them places and to do things with them that will promote like socialization and gross and fine motor skills, and then they use those skills then and they take it into public school. So like it's like I'm already resisting, and I know I said in my last video that I need to keep an open mind about things and like not to snub them automatically just because they're different. And I definitely caught myself here, and I'm like, okay, like just keep an open mind. Like I don't know, like, I mean, I'm a public school teacher, so anything that's like not public school, I'm like I hate I I just think that public school is good for so many things that when I hear people just like, oh, I'm going to a Montessori school, in my mind that means I have money and I'm going to do something that, like, I'm better than you. So I'm like, okay, just relax. That's not the case. It's fine. Or like when people homeschool, I have a hard time getting behind that too, but tangent. So then then the book starts talking about like the Google 20% time, and my husband had actually heard of this before I did, and he's like, oh yeah, like Google Maps came out of that, Google Earth, Gmail, like all of the, like, it seems like half of my phone came from this 20% project, or this 20% time. And although it says, what was interesting to me was it said that Marissa Mayer, Google's former vice president, has said that half of all new product launches had originated in this 20% time. So, I mean, I hope that Google it seems like Google, like, maybe should they be giving their employees more time to figure things out? And does that necessarily translate to education? I don't know. So they talk about Google's 20% time. And where I definitely had the most underlining was that the Google's culture and 20% time ties into the very same beliefs of the Montessori method. Maria's focus was not merely on education, but on learning. And then there's a bulleted list of what Maria Montessori's targets were in teaching kids how to learn. I underlined Marie's focus was not merely on education but on learning, and I started and I wrote there's a key difference right there, and it's kind of like a gut punch because I certainly think that the way that schools do it, like they said in the first chapter, like good grades equals good college, and that's like education. And I think that in my experience, I got both, like both education and also how to learn, or maybe I figured out how to learn on my own. I don't know. I mean, so long ago, it's so many years of schooling, I've kind of lost track at this point. Um, but it was a gut punch because it's like, okay, are educators just teaching kids like, okay, 1 + 1 = 2, and or like these are, I don't know, these are nouns, these are adjectives, these are adverbs, but like, are teachers teaching kids how to learn? So I don't I don't know. I mean, like, I think in the music room, I try and strike a balance between the two, you know. I try and give kids time to explore and come up with their own ideas. Um, but maybe my next step is getting the kids to, like, all right, here's the idea that you had, try it out, see how it goes, and then think critically about it. Because I give them time to, I give them time, or I try to give them time to like test out what they know, but if I don't know if I give them the tools to say like, okay, that doesn't work. Why doesn't it work, and what can we do to fix it? Although yeah, because I do give them time to fix it, but sometimes they don't know, or like they'll be like, yeah, that's good, and I'll be like, it's not. But how do I get them there without telling it to them? So I mean these targets like individual learning based on interest, hands-on learning opportunities, freedom to explore, not interrupting a work cycle, working at their own pace, focusing on the whole child, and teaching instead of correcting. I mean, again, back to what I was saying at the beginning, like this kind of sounds like what parents are supposed to be doing with kids anyways. So it doesn't seem like that in itself doesn't seem revolutionary to me, but like taking those ideas and putting them in like the regular education classroom and allowing children to do that. In here, does it talk about the intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, or was that no, that was chapter 1. But I mean, I also do think that these 7 items would help develop a child's intrinsic motivation as well. But man, like that's a tall order. Like that's very different from the way that I approach a lot of how I plan and a lot of what my goals are for the kids. So in the next paragraph, it says, despite the lauded success of these ideas in the business world, much of our current K-12 learning environment gives no time for students to choose their own learning topics and materials, which I underlined. And I'm like, yeah, like I'd agree with that statement. And then this book sets out to help educators bring these timely and all-important ideas into every classroom, by giving a clear framework for success that can be tied to any set of standards. To which I wrote, please, because, you know, like any set of standards is good. I feel like a lot of the professional development that I've had thus far has not been super relevant to what I do. So like, okay, if I can adapt this, like they say, just setting it out, like if I can adapt this to the music standards, great, I love it. So, and then underneath that I wrote like, okay, like let's give kids more meaningful education, or I guess more meaningful learning if we're going by what Maria Montessori thought. Then it goes on to talk about the real issue with our education system. And this was so, I mean, not funny, but like, there's a sentence, futurist Alvin Toffler explains the new reality. So we need to be able to just do things faster and, yeah, sorry. So the new reality is the 21st century workforce is all about learning. So being able to figure things out on your own, I think, basically. In the future, illiteracy will not be defined by those who cannot read and write, but by those who cannot learn and relearn. To which I drew an arrow and said, right, are we cultivating this in schools? And then a couple of sentences later, it says, so I ask, is our current system educating students to be innovative, creative, and adaptable? And to which I wrote, probably not, or not always. But, like, I see this in the classroom. I totally see this in the classroom. Like, the kids who can't take a concept and then adapt it to something different, you know? Or they can't figure things out. They're like, why won't this work on my tablet? And I'm like, I can fix it. But if I gave them 2 minutes just to fool around with it, they'd be able to figure it out. I mean, if toddlers can figure out technology, like, students can certainly figure it out, you know? So, oh man. But I see, like, I see that all the time. Like, students can't learn and relearn. Although, and I also see this, you know, in the social skills of kids. Like, they come to me and they're like, Mrs. Smith, this person's bothering me. I'm like, did you ask them to stop? They're like, oh, no. Mrs. Smith, did you ask them to stop? Yes. Did they stop? No. Did you ask them nicely? Oh, like, it's like a future illiteracy, those who cannot learn and relearn. I think future illiteracy can be applied to, like, not only academic skills, but like socialization skills as well, and like emotional skills. And I think that's a side effect of technology, not knowing how to interact socially. But again, tangent. So yes, so real issue with our educational system. It talks about how globalization is a big factor in education today, because now not only is the world a lot smaller, because I mean, you're on a computer, you can get in touch with somebody across the globe in no time. But it talks about how, like, okay, now that we're kind of a global community, jobs are opening up in places they never were before, and it's leading to the rise of like a global middle class, because people who were maybe living in poverty before, with the use of technology now, have skills that they didn't have before. So now not only are a lot of kids going to be competing with like everybody in the United States, but also like India and China. So this was a fascinating statement to me. There are still manufacturing jobs to be had. So the jobs that like a lot of our parents or grandparents may have had, like go work there for 30 years, retire with a nice pension. But the ones that aren't being outsourced need highly qualified workers. So like that, companies today are looking for programmers that can operate complex machinery, make quick and strong decisions, and be adaptable to changing conditions. Like, that's totally different from how it was before. I mean, like, my family's an anomaly. Like, well, I think my grandfather like worked at a factory job, and he put in his 30 years, and he retired and with a pension. But like, he was also, it's actually interesting. He was also, so he hasn't been around for a long time at this point, but he was an artist on the side. He made like replicas of people's houses, and actually I can show you one. Hold on. So my grandfather, he would take pictures of people's houses, and then he would, this is what he made. He made this. And now it's mine, even though it's not my house. I get to keep it. So this is what he did. This is what he did on the side. This is what he did for fun. So I'm wondering if my grandfather was around today, if he would have like a heads up on people, on other workers, because he had that creativity. Like he had to figure out, okay, like here's a picture of the house. How am I going to translate this two-dimensional picture into this three-dimensional object? And how to sand the roof, and how to pick out the colors, and how to like you can even see, like, I mean, I don't know how old this is. So he passed away in 2001. So there is no, I mean, this is at least 20 years old. But like, and this is the roof. Like, oops, there we go. Like keeping the roof in shape. Like, look at what good condition it's in. Like, he made these things to last. Oh, and it's really pretty. But like he had to problem solve. So I wonder if he would have had an upper hand, because he could make those decisions. He could make those creative decisions. But so, oh my gosh, that was a super tangent. But I don't know. I thought it was important. So yeah, so like even, I mean, so at Mid Lakes, like again, I think I said in my first video, the kids might, not all the kids are going to go to college, because I think that's kind of just like a fact of the district that we're in. So are we giving those kids the training in schools that they need, so that they can figure things out on their own, like on the job training? And I went into my OC's rant on the other one, so we're not doing that again. I'm going to, I mean, eventually I'll stop saying this, but I appreciate the way that this book is written, because it's not just disregarding, it is taking into account the realities of the teaching world. It's not just saying like, oh, you can do this, like regardless of what your school is saying, like you can totally make this happen. This book is saying like, yes, there are obstacles in the way as well. It's very real. It's acknowledging the reality. It says it's difficult to change an entire system, and teachers have to work within their school parameters for the time being. So like, yes, I appreciate the way this is written. It's like, it's acknowledging that like all teachers are working within a set of constraints, and we only have so much control, but the control that we have is important to be doing what we think is best for the students. So I appreciate that. I realized that I said something similar in my first video, so maybe I'll like start phasing those out. But just like, I appreciate like that they acknowledge the reality of being a teacher a lot. And then last, Giuliani gives a heading under the 20% solution, in which he gave his students 20% of their time to, it says, explore their passions and learn what they were interested in. Later it says, if you want to prepare students for life after school, 20% time and inquiry-driven learning is a must. Students don't need to fill in answer sheets or bubbles on a piece of paper. I think you threw a little shade at standardized testing. They need to be given the time to produce something of value to themselves and the world. And then he gives a bunch of, he gives the parameters of what the 20% project should look like. Obviously this is great, like when you give kids control of their learning, that's, man, it's so great. I did write, like, is this going to work with 11 and 12-year-olds too? Because I'm thinking that I want to test run this with my sixth graders come the school year. So I'm like, okay, do I have the resources I need right now in the classroom to be able to allow students to do that? So especially like research and comb through a litany of resources on their topic. Like, okay, are students gonna know? Are they gonna? How do I give them the resources they need to be successful? I mean, the library at school has like some resources. The internet certainly has a ton of resources, but I'm like, okay, are the kids gonna just know like how to find the information, or how am I going to make this happen? Which I know is part of this assignment. Or like reach out to experts around the world about their idea and learn from the best. Like, is that going to be possible for my students in like a 40-minute period for the last 20% of the classes of the school year? Like, I don't know. So, I mean, I don't yet know how to apply these eight parameters for the 20% project. I'm hoping that that's, the purpose of the book. But I mean, we'll see. I don't know. I will say that this chapter makes a pretty solid case for introducing this 20% project into the school day. And it's nice too. I mean, and like in Google in schools, it's nice because like there are things that need to be done. Like, I mean, in school there's like the state standards, and there's like you're preparing them for the ELA and the math tests, and there's a science curriculum and a social studies curriculum. But like 20% isn't a lot. Like on the cover, I mean, it's 12 minutes out of an hour, 20%. So it's like, I like that he's saying like you don't have to revolutionize your entire school day. Like you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to start everything from scratch. Just implement the 20% time and see what happens. Like just like dedicate 1/5 of your time to giving students, like to having them be like entirely in control of their learning, and see what happens. Like, I appreciate that. Like, that seems very doable. But I'm going to have to, read the rest of the book to see how to put it into practice, because leaving a bunch of 12-year-olds alone with their iPads to create something of their own desire regarding music sounds a little dangerous right now. So I'm hoping that the rest of the book will kind of help me start putting some ideas into place. So that ends chapter 2. I will see you later for chapter 3.